There's a number in personal finance that changes everything. And it is not $1 million. It is not $500,000. It is not even $250,000. It is $100,000. And I know that sounds random. I know it sounds like just another round number people throw around on the internet to make you feel bad about your savings account. But stay with me here. Because what happens after you cross that $100,000 line is genuinely one of the most fascinating things in all of money. And once you see it, you will never look at your portfolio the same way again. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you have been saving and investing $500 every single month. You are putting that money into an S&P 500 index fund, which is basically a basket that holds a tiny slice of the 500 biggest companies in America. Names like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, all of them packed into one investment. Historically, the S&P 500 has returned roughly 10% per year on average over the last century. Some years it does way better, like 2023 when it returned over 26%, or 2024 when it returned around 25%. Other years, it drops. But on average, over long stretches of time, about 10% per year is what you can expect if you just stay in the game. So you are investing $500 a month at roughly 10% annually. How long does it take you to hit your first $100,000? About 7 years. 7 years of grinding, budgeting, saying no to things, watching your friends take vacations while you are telling yourself this will all be worth it someday. 7 years. Now here is where the magic kicks in. And I do mean magic because the math almost feels like cheating. How long does it take to go from 100,000 to 200,000? Not another 7 years. Not even close. It takes roughly 5 years. You just shaved 2 entire years off the timeline without changing a single thing about how much you save. Same $500 a month, same market returns, but somehow it happened faster. And from 200,000 to 300,000? About 3.5 years. 300 to 400,000? Under 3 years. Do you see what is happening here? Every single time you reach the next $100,000 milestone, it arrives faster than the one before it. The gaps keep shrinking. The speed keeps increasing. It is like rolling a snowball down a hill. At the top, you are working hard just to get it moving. But once it hits a certain size, the hill does most of the work. This is compound interest, and even though people talk about it constantly, almost nobody truly feels it until they cross that $100,000 threshold. Compound interest is just a fancy way of saying your money earns money, and then that earned money earns its own money. It is interest on top of interest on top of interest, stacking up layer after layer like one of those Russian nesting dolls, except each doll is slightly bigger than the last. At small amounts, this effect is basically invisible. If you have $1,000 and it earns 10%, congratulations, you just made $100. Nice dinner, maybe. But if you have $100,000 and it earns 10%, that is $10,000 in a single year. That is almost $1,700 that appeared in your account every single month without you lifting a finger. That is more money earned passively in 1 month than what most people are actively putting in. And that right there is the tipping point. That is the moment everything shifts. Think about it this way. When you are investing $500 a month and your portfolio is small, say $20,000 or $30,000, the heavy lifting is being done entirely by you. Your contributions are the star of the show. The market returns are like a backup dancer. Nice to have, but not making much of a difference. At $30,000, a 10% return gives you $3,000 in a year. That is $250 a month. Meanwhile, you are personally adding $500 a month. So your contributions are still double what the market is giving you. You are doing most of the work. But at $100,000, something beautiful happens. A 10% return on $100,000 is $10,000 a year, which breaks down to about $833 per month. Your personal contribution? Still $500. For the first time in your investing life, your money is now earning more than you are saving. Read that again. Your money is contributing more to your wealth than you are. Your portfolio has basically hired itself a second income. It went from being your employee to becoming your business partner, and eventually, if you keep going, it becomes the boss. You just keep showing up with your $500 and your portfolio says, "That is cute. I made $800 last month while you were sleeping." And this is not just some feel-good theoretical exercise. This is real math playing out in real people's accounts every single day. The problem is that most people never see it. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, only about 22% of Americans have more than $100,000 saved up in their retirement accounts. Let that sit for a second. Nearly 80% of Americans have never crossed this line. And it gets worse. Around 58% of Americans have less than $10,000 in retirement savings. The median emergency savings in this country right now sits at about $600. $600. That is not even enough to cover a surprise car repair, let alone a financial foundation that could compound into life-changing wealth. So why do so many people never make it? Because the first 100,000 is a grind. It is boring and slow. You check your investment app after 6 months and your balance has gone from $0 to maybe $3,000 or $4,000. And you think, is this it? I could have bought a vacation with this money. That feeling right there is what kills most people's financial future. They quit before the compounding ever kicks in. They pull the money out. They stop investing because they did not double their money in 6 months like some guy on TikTok promised. The brilliant thing about understanding the $100,000 threshold is that it gives you something to aim for. It gives the boring years a purpose. You are not just saving for some abstract future. You are building a machine, a money-making machine. And that machine does not turn on until it hits a certain size. Below 100,000, you are assembling the parts. You are tightening the bolts. You are reading the instruction manual and wondering if you bought the right thing. But once you hit 100,000, you flip the switch and the machine starts running on its own. Your job is still to feed it, sure. You still keep adding your monthly contributions. But now the machine is generating its own fuel too. Here is another way to visualize this. Let us say you invest $500 a month from age 25 until 65. That is 40 years at an average annual return of 10%. Your total contributions? 500 times 12 months times 40 years equals $240,000 of your own money. But the portfolio's final value? Over $3.1 million, which means more than $2.8 million, roughly 92% of your entire portfolio, came from compound growth alone. Not from your savings, not from your discipline, from the market doing what it does, but only because you gave it enough time and a strong enough base to build on. And this brings us to perhaps the most important lesson hiding inside all of this. The reason compounding explodes after $100,000 is not because 100,000 is some magical number chosen by the universe. It is because 100,000 is approximately the point where, for a typical saver investing $500 or so per month, the investment returns start to outweigh the contributions. It is the point where the engine becomes more powerful than the fuel you are feeding it. Below that point, you are mostly driving on your own gas. Above that point, the investment returns become the main driver and your contributions become the bonus. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, this is great, but I'm nowhere near $100,000. How do I get there? Here is the honest answer. It requires being a little bit obsessed for a few years. Not in a toxic, never enjoy your life kind of way, but in a strategic, intentional way. The median household income in the United States is around $80,000 to $84,000. The personal savings rate has been hovering around 3 to 4%. That is painfully low. If you are earning $80,000 and saving 3%, that is only $2,400 a year going toward your future. At that rate, even with market returns, you would need decades to hit 100,000. The people who reach the $100,000 milestone faster are the ones who figure out how to push that savings rate up dramatically. 10% is good, 15% is better, 20% or higher, and you are really cooking. A person earning $80,000 a year who manages to invest 15% of their gross income is putting away $1,000 a month. At 10% annual returns, that person crosses 100,000 in about 6 years. And then the compounding machine roars to life. From there, the next 100,000 takes roughly 3.5 years, then 2.5, then under 2. The snowball is rolling, and it is getting bigger, faster than you ever imagined it could. Let me tell you the story that really made this click for me. Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor who ever lived, has a net worth of roughly $150 billion. But here is the part that will rearrange your brain. Over 99% of that wealth was accumulated after his 50th birthday. He was a millionaire by 30, which was incredible for the 1960s, but he did not become a billionaire until 56. And nearly 98% of his fortune was built after age 65. As Morgan Housel put it in The Psychology of Money, Buffett's skill is investing, but his secret is time. If Buffett had retired at 65, you probably would never have heard of him. His wealth went from $12 billion at 65 to over $140 billion in the next 3 decades. That is not genius. That is compounding being given enough time and enough of a base to work with. And you do not need to be Warren Buffett for this to work. You do not need to pick individual stocks. You do not need to be a genius. You just need to do 3 things. Save consistently. Invest in something broadly diversified like an S&P 500 index fund. And then, and this is the hardest part, do not touch it. Do not sell when the market drops 20%. Do not cash out to buy a boat. Do not switch strategies every time some financial influencer tells you they found the next big thing. The hardest part about building wealth is not the math, it is the patience. Here is something else that makes the $100,000 milestone so powerful psychologically. Once you cross it, the small financial emergencies that derail most people barely register. A $2,000 car repair? That is 2% of your portfolio. An unexpected job loss? You have months of runway. The $100,000 mark is not just a financial milestone. It is an emotional one. It is the point where money stops being a source of constant stress and starts being a source of quiet confidence. And that confidence changes your decision-making in ways that compound just like the money does. You negotiate harder for raises because you are not desperate. You take calculated career risks because you have a safety net. You end up making more money because you are not operating from a place of fear. Now let me walk you through the math one more time because I really want this to sink in. At a 10% annual return, here is what happens to $100,000 if you just leave it alone and never add another penny. After 5 years, it grows to about $161,000. After 10 years, about $259,000. After 20 years, roughly $673,000. And after 30 years, that original $100,000 has turned into over $1.7 million. 100,000 became 1.7 million. You did nothing. You contributed nothing extra. You just left it alone and let compounding do what compounding does. Now imagine if you did keep contributing. $500 a month on top of that, starting $100,000 at 10% annual returns for 30 years? You end up with roughly $2.8 million. The combination of a solid base plus consistent contributions plus time is the most powerful wealth-building formula ever discovered by humanity. It is not sexy. Nobody is going to make a movie about it. But it works every single time. And this is where I want to introduce something called the Rule of 72. A fun little shortcut that tells you how fast your money doubles. You take 72 and divide it by your annual return. At 10%, 72 divided by 10 equals 7.2. Your money doubles roughly every 7 years. Starting with 100,000, you would have 200,000 after 7 years, 400,000 after 14, 800,000 after 21, and over 1.6 million after 28 years. No additional contributions needed. That is why time in the market matters so much more than timing the market. You do not need to buy at the perfect moment. You just need to buy and then sit on your hands for decades. But here is something most people do not talk about. The flip side of this compounding explosion is that pulling money out early does not just cost you the amount you withdraw. It costs you all the future compounding that money would have generated. This is called opportunity cost, which just means the price of what you gave up by making a different choice. If you pull out $10,000 from your portfolio at age 30, you are not just losing $10,000. At 10% annually over 35 years, that $10,000 would have grown into roughly $280,000 by retirement. So that withdrawal really cost you $280,000. Every dollar you remove from your compounding machine takes its future babies with it, and its grandbabies, and its great-grandbabies. It is a whole family tree of wealth that just vanishes. This is exactly why financial advisors practically beg young people to start investing early, even if the amounts feel embarrassingly small. A 22-year-old investing just $100 a month might think their portfolio is meaningless after a year. But those contributions have 43 years of compounding ahead of them. Those early dollars are seeds. And if you keep planting seeds for 7 or 8 years until you cross the $100,000 mark, you have got yourself a forest that basically grows on its own. I also want to address something that trips people up when they hear about the 10% average return. Average does not mean every year. The stock market is wildly uneven. In 2022, the S&P 500 dropped about 18%. People panicked and sold. And then in 2023, it shot up over 26%, followed by about 25% in 2024 and nearly 18% in 2025. 3 consecutive years of double-digit gains that the panickers completely missed. The average return includes the crashes. It includes the scary years. But the boom years have won out every single time over long periods. The S&P 500 has never lost money over any 20-year period in its history. Not during the Great Depression, not during the dot-com bubble, not during 2008, not during COVID. That is the kind of track record that deserves your patience. So let me bring this all together. The reason compounding explodes after $100,000 is fundamentally about a crossover point. Below it, you are the primary driver of your wealth. Above it, the math starts doing the heavy lifting. Your portfolio's returns begin generating more new wealth each year than you could save from your paycheck alone. At $200,000, a 10% year gives you $20,000 in gains. At $500,000, a 10% year gives you $50,000, which for many Americans is close to an entire year of take-home pay. Your money is literally working a full-time job alongside you. And this compounds not just in your investment account, but across your entire financial life. People with strong financial foundations make better career decisions, avoid predatory debt, and have the mental bandwidth to pursue opportunities that people living paycheck to paycheck cannot. The $100,000 milestone is not the finish line. It is the starting line of a completely different financial game. Below it, you are playing defense. Above it, you are playing offense, and the scoreboard moves faster and faster in your favor. Here is my challenge to you. If you have not hit 100,000 yet, your only job is to get there. Do not stress about individual stocks or crypto or real estate. Just get to 100,000 in broadly diversified investments as fast as you possibly can. Automate your investments so the money moves before you see it. Increase your savings rate every time you get a raise. Cut the expenses that do not actually make you happy. And then, once you cross that threshold and see your money earning more than you are putting in, you will understand something no video or book can truly teach you. You will check your account after a good month and see that it grew by more than your entire paycheck. And in that moment, everything changes. Not because you got lucky, but because you built a machine, turned it on, and had the patience to let it run. That first 100,000 is the hardest money you will ever make. Everything after that is the smartest money you will ever have.